In today's guide we're going to go through how to configure OpenWrt for the first time. So we've done a lot of videos on how to install OpenWrt on different routers, so this is the follow on from that. So we often get asked questions about what's the first steps you can do when setting up your OpenWrt router. So today I'm going to be using this TP-Link. It really doesn't matter what router you're using because OpenWrt works virtually exactly the same across all routers. So I've got a fresh install on here. We're going to go through the first steps. We're going to log in via the browser. We're going to set our interfaces up, make sure our wireless is all set up, and make it a functional router for you to get started with. For starters, I'm going to use the blue port on the back of this router, which is the WAN, and we're going to plug that into the incoming internet, and I'm going to connect my computer to one of these extra ports. So yours will probably be set up like this, but just make sure you're in the LAN ports connected to your PC and your WAN port is bringing the internet in. If you're setting this up as a wireless repeater, we'll go through that as well. So in that case you just need to connect to one of the LAN ports and ignore the WAN port. Let's start. Okay, so let's start by opening up a browser. I've plugged the router in and it's powered on. By default your router will have an address of 192.168.1.1. This brings you to the login page. Your username will be root, and to start with you'll have no password at all, as you see from this error here. If you have a problem logging in at that point, just clear the cache in your browser. That will sort that issue out. As you can see, we've still got an error message saying, a warning saying we've got no password. So we'll go to the password configuration, and it's really important that we set a strong password for this because, as I say, OpenWrt is a very powerful little machine, so just make sure you set something very strong. So we go down to the bottom and we're going to click Save and Apply. We have to wait for all configurations to be done. What you see on your screen may be slightly different to what I have here because your theme might be different. You can install other themes. I might do another video on that later, but this is quite an older version. Most new versions are using the Material theme, but this is the Bootstrap theme. But regardless of what version you're using, everything is laid out virtually exactly the same. It just looks different. So the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to double check all our interfaces are correct. So if we go to click on interfaces, we can just double check that we have a LAN port set up and we have a WAN port. So I've plugged in my WAN port as well as my LAN port. So I've got internet coming in through my WAN, and LAN is obviously connected to my computer directly. Now we can move on to setting up wireless. So if we go down to network and wireless, you can see that we have a radio here waiting to be activated. By default, OpenWrt doesn't start your wireless in case you don't want it running, and in this router I only have one wireless radio. Most routers have two. This one only has a 2.4 GHz, but most other routers have 5 GHz as well. So if you see more than one radio, what you'll need to do is exactly what I'm doing here, but just repeat the steps for the second radio as well. And yeah, so we'll go through that. So for starters, let's edit this radio. And from here we can see what settings are already set. So you can change the frequency, the channel. If you know what channel you has the least traffic on in your area, you can set a channel, or you can ask OpenWrt to do it automatically. There's a lot of apps on Android and iOS for just scanning your local area, and it will show you which channel is best to use. You can change the width. The higher the width, the further range you might get, but it can reduce the quality of the signal, so bear in mind you can have a little play with that. Also, transmit power is best to leave in auto, purely because there are rules and regulations about how much power you can use in your area. So we'll go on to set in your area as well. So there's legal requirements of what you can and can't use. But to be honest, your router's probably not, if you've bought it in your country, it's unlikely to go over them ratings anyway. By default, often the country code is wrong, so I'm going to set my country code, which is GP, I think, in this. Yeah, for the United Kingdom. Make sure you set yours, because, as I say, there are rules as how to set Wi-Fi up, and this will make sure that OpenWrt is following those rules for you. You can set the distance optimization, but this is, you can fiddle with these settings later. For the time being, let's just make sure we get it up and running. So you can have, for starters, we're probably going to set up an access point so we can connect to the router. We can change the ESSID. That'll be what you see in your phone or whatever when you look up the router. So for me, it's going to say OpenWrt, but you can change this to whatever you like. You can leave the network as it is. The most important thing is everyone needs to really put on wireless security. So we can, unless this is a guest network. So we go down to WPA2 PSK, and then we need to set a key. So you can enable crack countermeasures. I don't know how well it is tested at the moment, but it's a good security feature. So you can have that, or it's probably best to test that out with your installation and see if it makes any differences, but it's better to have it on than off. But I'll leave it off for now. So we're going to save and apply that. So we now have set a wireless access point with a password and a name, but you can see it's still not enabled, so we're going to enable that. So if I had a 5 GHz here as well, I'd go in, I'd do exactly the same thing, set some security, set the access point name, save it, and then come out and enable it. If you want to disable it, you can just disable it from there. If you're setting this up as a wireless bridge, on the other hand, once you've done this part of the setup and created an access point, you can now look for a wireless access point to connect to. So for me, I can scan other available wireless networks. You can see lots are in the area. Yeah, and I can connect to, say, my Show Me router. I would type in my WPA passphrase. You can leave all these settings as default and then submit. Now this will connect to my other router, and then it will work as a wireless bridge. Now we have set that up to connect to my other router, but we also need to click save and apply. But yeah, now that will connect to that. And coming back, you can see that we are a client on the Show Me router, and we're also we've also created a secondary network that we can connect to. At this point, if you're having any trouble connecting to the internet via your router, it's probably a good idea to have a little look at Firewall. By default, it's set quite strong, but you should definitely go in there and have a quick look. And another useful feature is the diagnostics. From here we can try and ping openwrt.org, and then it should give us a ping back from that. as long as we have internet connection, and you can also use trace lookup and NS. So that concludes our short guide on configuring the OpenWrt router. And this is just the first basic steps of setting up your configuration. We'll definitely go into more things about setting up the firewall and things like that, but if there's a specific thing you want us to cover, perhaps you want us to set up a VPN or VLAN or something along them lines, just throw us a comment in the comment section and we'll try and cover that in one of our next videos. So I want to carry on doing these videos because OpenWrt can be quite difficult to set up if you're not used to it. So yeah, if you've liked this video, make sure you give us a like and make sure you subscribe. Thanks a lot.